welcome to the live session of Narayana IAS Academy. So, the topic that we have actually picked up today for our live discussion is what is the disproportionate impact that the extreme or the climate anomalies, or specifically to say the extreme heat, what kind of disproportionate impact it actually has on women. And this actually shows the increased vulnerability that women actually have in this particular society, and specifically with respect to that of the climate change. And also we will be discussing about various factors like the gender norms that actually further aggravate this disproportionate impact, as well as limited access to the resources that women actually have, both in the urban as well as in the rural areas, as well as we'll be discussing unequal norms, or you can say power dynamics that is actually existing in this society that further places a woman in her vulnerable zone. So, this particular topic, the toll that extreme heat takes on women, has actually been picked up today, and it is actually relevant as we will discuss the concept of what is heat waves, as well as it forms a part of women empowerment. And with respect to that of your syllabus, it can be mapped to GS paper 3 for your mains examination, environmental pollution and degradation, and GS paper 2, vulnerable sections of the society. So, moving forward, let us actually understand what kind of similar question had actually appeared in the previous exams, okay, that is previous edition or the previous year's examination of the UPSC. So, there has been a mains question in the year 2013 regarding the causes for the formation of the heat islands in the urban habitat of the world. What do you understand by the concept of the urban heat island? What do you understand by the phenomenon of the temperature inversion in meteorology, and how does it affect the weather and habitants of the place? Okay, so here it is very important to understand that the topic of climate change itself was important, and next came the heat waves as well as the global warming, and now what is important is how it has actually disproportionately impacted women is what we will be discussing. Okay, so moving forward, let us understand the article actually discusses the disproportionate impact of extreme heat on women in India, focusing on their increased vulnerability due to the unusual or the unequal power dynamics that exist. Of course, there are a lot of gender norms where women are restricted from going out. They do not have access to enough of drinking water, as well as they do not have any kind of access to fans and appliances like air conditioners, and also with respect to that of their clothing, they are expected to dress up fully. So, all this actually further exacerbate the issue and limited access to resources in both the urban as well as the rural settings. So, before moving forward, let us understand what is this particular term of extreme heat condition is. Okay, so it is nothing but it is a condition where the air temperature becomes extremely fatal to the human body when actually exposed. So, this is qualitatively, you can say this. Quantitatively, if we actually want to define what is this extreme heat wave or other things, we can say that it is the departure from the normal temperature. Okay. So, if certain conditions, like if the departure of around 4.5 to 6.4 actually exists, then it is called as the heat wave, and beyond that is called as a severe heat wave. And this particular, if this particular conditions actually, it is if any of the condition is met in 2 stations for at least 2 consecutive days, then what happens? The IMD actually comes forward and declares that it is a heat wave condition. Okay, this is a simple way to understand. So, there are a number of causes of heat waves. Okay, so one of the causes can be the high pressure systems, where there is trapping of heat near the surface and causing the temperature to rise, and then formation of heat domes. The second can be GHG emissions as well as global warming, as all of us know. And here it is important for us to actually understand the 6th assessment report of the IPCC. So, what have been the observations and what is the current trend of heat wave scenario globally and for India? It's very important. And third reason can be the land use changes as well as the urbanization, like because there are a lot of high concentration of buildings and roads everywhere, resulting in the formation of concrete jungles specifically in the urban areas. And there can also be drought as well as lack of precipitation, that is rain, as well as the effect of El Nino, which actually affects the precipitation and temperature across the globe. If you see, so these are all the causes. If you see the effects of heat waves or the impacts of heat waves, it can be divided into three. One can be economic, where you can actually talk about there is reduced labor productivity. You can talk about energy systems over there. There are actually strain in the energy systems. The next one can be actually agricultural damage, etc. So these are all the economic impacts. If you see the ecological impacts, there can be water scarcity, there can be increased wildfire, as well as there is stress on the wildlife ecosystem. And finally, if you see, the next one is health as well as the health and social impacts, where you have the heat related diseases or discomforts, heat related diseases. There is also increased mortality and impacts on vulnerable groups. So this is very, very important. I explained this because this is what is actually impacting women disproportionately, and this is what this article is actually talking about. Okay. So now this is what the disproportionate impact of extreme heat on women in India, focusing on their vulnerability due to all these reasons. Now moving forward, let us actually have the introduction of this particular topic. So extreme heat has actually been a prevailing and a consistent situation in India, okay? And with respect to 2023, if you see, this is actually recorded as the warmest year ever. And also in India, the record breaking temperatures have actually been observed from May to June 2024. This has actually intensified the further challenges faced by the population, particularly the vulnerable sections, in that too particularly the women. So unequal power dynamics is there. Gender norms and unequal access to the resources exacerbate the impact of extreme heat on women, and this has actually been observed and highlighted by the Global Gender Gap Index, where India's rank is actually 18th from the bottom. Very, very concerning. So here it is important to understand the index, what are the key highlights of the index, and what has been the ranking of India, whether it has improved or it has actually declined in its ranking when compared to that of the previous year. All this becomes important. Now with more than 1 in 6 women in the world living in India because of our population, the reality of extreme heat is a pressing issue, and this actually needs our urgent attention in forms of policy regulation, in forms of changing the societal stigma, in terms of giving them education and empowerment so that they are aware of what is required to maintain a healthy physiology, etc. Now, impacts of extreme heat on women. First one is the strain on their health. So there are heat related diseases that actually the women in particular are actually exposed to, particularly with respect to their percentage of fat concentration in the body, or sometimes the water levels in the body when compared to that of men. Okay. So women are more vulnerable to heat related diseases or illness such as heat cramps, severe heat stroke and hypothermia due to the physiological factors like body fat percentage as well as the content of water level in their body. Now, maternal and child health. Heat stress actually increases the risk of preterm delivery. What do you mean by preterm delivery? That is, the baby is actually born before the completion of 37 weeks of gestation. Okay, so this is what it is. So, preterm delivery. There is also miscarriage and stillbirths happening. What is stillbirths? The baby is already dead in the womb of the mother. Also compounding the challenges faced by women. Okay, so this actually increases further the maternal mortality rate. As of 2020, if you see, India's maternal mortality ratio was actually 103 deaths per 1 lakh live birth. So here it is important to understand what do you mean by the fertility rate, the maternal mortality rate, etc. because fertility rate was asked in your 2024 prelims paper. Next one, there is dual burden. So women always have a dual burden, okay? That is, first thing, physiologically they are already vulnerable, and second thing, they actually have the responsibility of taking up the caregiving this one. So they are more of caregivers, okay? So they have majority of caregiving responsibilities apart from the health related issues they face. Now comes, apart from the physiological and health vulnerability, now comes the economic and productivity loss. Of course, there is productivity loss for women. So here heat stress reduces the productivity. This causes women to work for longer hours in order to complete their unpaid domestic tasks, leading to increased time poverty. Next one, opportunity cost. The productivity loss due to heat waves translates to 90 more minutes of work per day in India, and this further affects women's ability to earn extra income, acquire skills, or to even take rest. The next one is very, very concerning, that is living conditions. There are a lot of informal settlements. For example, if you go to the rural areas, you can actually see women, actually living in heat trapped homes made of tin, asbestos. First thing, they are not allowed to go to work. Second thing, because of the clothing pattern. And third thing is because of these inhospitable conditions, like where the houses are made of asbestos sheets, tin, etc., which actually turn into heat chambers during high temperatures. Now moving forward, there's something called as energy poverty. What is this? Women actually do not have access. First of all, they have limited access to many of the resources that men have. Second thing, they actually undergo this process of energy poverty, where they do not have access to all these fans, then air conditioners, coolers, etc., in both the rural and the urban areas. Next, there is a condition of water scarcity as well as power fluctuations also. So since there is water scarcity, there is actually reduced consumption of water. So they actually are not aware of staying hydrated during these extremely heat conditions. Next is, there is occupational vulnerability. Let's understand. There are a lot of urban informal laborers. Okay, so some of the women actually come accompanying their husbands to the urban areas, and they are actually employed in the informal sectors, where female informal laborers working in marketplaces, in streets, in construction sites, landfills, or even as domestic helpers face the harsh weather conditions, making them highly vulnerable. Next one is rural workers, where women actually work in the fields, okay, for sowing as well as the transfer of this nursery, so in agriculture, particularly under programs like construction or infrastructure development under the MG Narega scheme. They actually undergo prolonged exposure to the sun, impacting the health as well as productivity. The final one is the social and the gender inequality. So what is this? Gender norms actually restrict the mobility of women, where men do not allow women to go out for work. That is one thing. So also they dictate the clothing styles, where they are expected to cover, from the head to toe, even during the harsh conditions. So this will be unbearably high. Okay. Next one, unpaid labor. That is, they are actually involved in unpaid labor when compared to men, and this further, exacerbates the physical and the economic toll of extreme heat. Now moving forward, what shall be done in order to tackle this? The first one is, we need to develop or bring in place a climate friendly urban planning, where you need to develop the urban areas with green spaces and natural cooling methods in order to mitigate extreme heat. For example, even if there is a construction of park, there has to be a lot of trees. There has to be, free drinking water available for women, so that they can actually rest there and then resume their other domestic work. Next is sustainable cooling technologies. You need to promote affordable and sustainable cooling technologies for the vulnerable population in both the urban as well as the rural areas. There has to be fair division of care work, very, very important. There has to be, that is, the responsibilities actually have to lay equal on the shoulders of both men as well as women. So implement the policies for a fair distribution of unpaid care work between men and women. Next is empowerment and education, so that they know if they are sufficiently hydrated, so that they know if they are physiologically healthy, etc. Next one is policy and legislation, where you need to formulate and enforce policies addressing the impact of extreme heat on women, considering their needs as well as vulnerabilities. So after discussing this entire topic of, heat waves as well as climate and how it is actually impacting women, we need to always arrive at a conclusion. Okay, conclusion has to be neutral. It can also be substantiation of any one of the initiatives that have been taken by the government, etc., in order to add buzzwords to your answer and to score better. So as India actually grapples with soaring temperatures, strengthening the resilience of women to heat strain is imperative. That is, you need to strengthen the resistance or the resilience that women actually have to the climate change, in order to safeguard their health, in order to safeguard the productivity and overall well-being. The social power gradient that influences women's capacity to face climate crisis must also be addressed to ensure that there is a fair and inclusive response to the growing threat of extreme heat. So this is actually a very simple conclusion. So over here, we've actually come to the end of our live discussion on this heat waves and the associated impacts. So women actually being one of the vulnerable sections of the population, it is important for us to understand in different dimensions what are the vulnerabilities that women actually face. So climate change is one of the things, and also climate action, which is mentioned in SDG 13, that you can actually incorporate in your answer writing to make it more effective, okay, and more appealing. So with this, we've come to the end. So for more such live sessions as well as more thoughtful videos, please do like, share and subscribe to Narayana IAS Academy YouTube channel. Thank you.